Was grey.
Grey.
Grey. They all are grey, and the message is grey.
The word I was in health or the sciences, and they have a problem with that. So when someone comes to them with evidence and says this shows that, they tend to go for the summary. They're naive and easily fooled. And there's a whole industry now there to try and fool journalists. When I was a reporter, you had to go out with a pad and a piece of paper and actually get stories. Now you can just sit in front of the screen and press releases will just tumble in there.
You know, the media aren't looking at the whole academic viewpoint, as Jeff was saying, they're kind of generalising really, and they would look at a summary rather than looking at the detail behind the story. And that might be partly because of the pressures on the journalists themselves, that they haven't got the time to go into the kind of detail that, for example, Watergate and that very heavy investigative journalism can go into.
As you go up nationally, or as you locals or regions, I think that the editorial lines are more pronounced. You kind of have a fairly clear idea that if you're going to be sat on Radio 4, you're going to be challenged more than if you're on, sitting on, Heart FM or something like that. Leicester Mercury about flu, for example. We pretty much know that if we're sensible, it's going to be reported relatively accurately. There may be one or two twists, but generally it's going to be okay. But if you report something that's going higher than that, you kind of have to just make sure that there's no room for interpretation or spin or twist or anything like that.
Because I've been on a radio station in Leicester where it was a phone-in. And if you've got a phone-in situation, it's completely out of your control, and you end up totally accountable for what you say to that individual who's a member of the public. And we're not usually in that situation, especially in public health, because we deal with population type approaches. We don't actually deal with individuals on a day-to-day basis.
Individualised stories you would get within broadcast journalism, for example. There are kind of advantages and disadvantages to that, of course, as well, in that a negative story is usually a good story in terms of the press and in terms of reporting on an individual, whereas the very positive stories that come out of the NHS from individuals often are the ones that don't get reported.
Do you think that over the last 10, 20 years, the way in which we actually report health matters has changed? I mean, was it, showing my age, Reggie Boson kept on the news reporting that, the NHS is... I mean, is it fundamentally different now to how it was before? Is it more of a friend now? Is it more of a foe now with the change?
I think it has changed in that we've become more savvy. I think that there's been a real change of direction with Tony Blair actually coming on board in terms of the way that the whole media and PR operates. Because he was quite a sort of slick player, really, wasn't he? And I think because of that, and because of the way that the department is that by being savvy, understanding what the media are there to do, and playing them at their own game, I think we find that we can actually end up with mutual benefit, wherein they sell their stories, and we also can promote some of our messages as well.
I'm amazed, and I think it's really encouraging at the number of people that are just sitting around the table today talking about the media, because in a previous life in another NHS organisation, if you asked people to come to a meeting to talk about the media, they'd have all been far too busy. And I think it's fantastic that people have actually got an interest and are really supportive.
Some of the points that have been raised throughout, in terms of negative, there are quite a few negative points that I've put down about the power without responsibility for consequences, and that came out very strongly with some good examples like MMR, and also the need to blame as well and find scapegoats. But there was a query there about whether that was actually the media wishing to do that, or whether it was the public that was driving the media around that. And also to be mindful that members of the media also have a career in mind, that they are under quite a lot of pressure to try and develop themselves in their own careers. In terms of positives, there were quite a few positives, but they're captured in terms of if you can play them at their own game, then you can find the positives. issues around managing the media potentially stifling the debate, but also a counter to that, that actually the media was not about creating debate, but actually putting forward points of view. Ultimately, and perhaps one to leave it on, is around who is actually responsible. Is it the members of the media, or is it the people that feed the media, or is it the people who are consuming the media?